There are moments in the history of science when the familiar map of the universe is torn to shreds. Moments when a single set of data, a single anomaly in a telescope, a single line in an equation forces us to question everything we thought we knew. Today is one of those moments. The world of astronomy is buzzing, discussing a new publication. Headlines scream of triumph. New, compelling evidence for Planet 9 presented. Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin of Caltech, the very same Pluto killers and fathers of the Planet 9 hypothesis, have laid their trump cards on the table. Their new analysis, based on the movement of an even greater number of trans-Neptunian objects, seems to leave no doubt. Out there, in the icy darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, something massive is hiding. Something 5 to 10 times heavier than Earth, wielding a gravitational whip to herd the chaotic flock of icy worlds in the Kuiper Belt into a neat, almost unnatural order. The scientific establishment is celebrating. They're calling it the greatest discovery of the 21st century. They say we are on the verge of meeting the last missing member of our solar family. That's the official story. A beautiful, elegant, logical narrative about the triumph of the human mind. But what if this story is just a smokescreen? What if the real truth, hidden in the blind spots of their own data, is far more complex, more astonishing, and more terrifying? A truth that the system prefers to ignore. Before we dive into this investigation, let's rewind the tape. The search for a ninth planet is a true detective story, stretching back more than 100 years. It all began with Percival Lowell and his obsession with Planet X. In the early 20th century, he noticed strange wobbles in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune and theorized they were being tugged by an unknown giant world. His calculations were flawed, based on inaccurate data, but his idea, his ghost, took root in the minds of astronomers. And in 1930, Clyde Tombaugh, working at Lowell Observatory, discovered Pluto. It seemed Planet X had been found, but Pluto turned out to be tiny, far too small to influence the giants. The hunt continued. For decades we searched for this phantom world, only to find emptiness. And then, in early 2016, Brown and Batygin published their fateful paper. They said, "Stop looking at Uranus and Neptune. Look further. Look at the most distant objects in our system." They analyzed the orbits of 6 extreme trans-Neptunian objects, icy rocks whose orbits are stretched so far that they travel hundreds of astronomical units away from the sun. And they discovered something impossible. Imagine 6 pendulums swinging in a vast, dark room. And suddenly you realize they are all swinging in the same direction. All their orbits are tilted at the same angle to the plane of the solar system. The probability of this happening by chance was infinitesimal, just 0.007%. It was like cosmic choreography. There had to be a conductor, an unseen shepherd using its gravitational staff to align this scattered flock. That was Planet 9. A giant with a mass several times that of Earth, revolving in an incredibly elongated orbit with a period of 10 to 20,000 years. And here we are, 8 years later. Brown and Batygin's new paper seems to settle the debate. They've added another 12.5 new objects to their analysis, and the anomaly hasn't just persisted, it has become even more pronounced. The statistical significance has climbed to 5 sigma. In the world of physics, that's the gold standard. It's the level at which you announce the discovery of the Higgs boson. The scientific community is ecstatic. Press releases from NASA and ESA are full of optimism. A new space race is beginning. Who will be the first to see this world in a telescope? Everyone is looking at the same spot. Everyone is singing the same song. And it's precisely at this moment, when all eyes are on the stage, that you need to look behind the curtain. Because it's right there, in the fine print of the scientific paper's appendices, in the raw data files they graciously made public, that the first crack in this monumental official narrative appears. The first, inconvenient detail. This detail concerns its mass. You see, we can't put Planet 9 on a scale. We can only estimate its mass indirectly, by the strength of its gravitational influence on other objects. It's like trying to guess an invisible person's weight by the depth of the impression they leave on a mattress. The problem is, with each new study, that mattress sags differently. In 2016, they were talking about a mass of roughly 10 Earth masses. In 2019, with new data, the estimate dropped to 5 Earth masses. Other independent papers cited values from 6 to 8. And in their latest article, the authors again mention a range of 5 to 10, as if admitting that the precision hasn't improved, but has in fact become blurrier. The official explanation? It sounds simple and reassuring. Observational errors, incomplete data, statistical noise. They say we are only seeing a small fraction of the objects in the Kuiper Belt, and as we find more, our models will become more accurate, and the mass estimate will stabilize. It sounds logical. It's what the system is supposed to say. It must maintain calm, smooth over the rough edges, and reduce anomalies to simple noise. But what if it's not noise? What if it's a signal? What if the mass isn't just being refined? What if it's changing? Imagine you're investigating a missing ship. You have no photographs of it, but you have data on the wakes it leaves. At first, the wakes tell you it was a small boat. A year later, new data from the wakes point to a cargo barge. A few years after that, to a massive tanker. Would you conclude that your instruments are inaccurate? Or would you hypothesize something far more insane? That the ship is growing. That it's being built right there in the ocean. And this is where the second, silent actor in our drama enters the stage. An object that mainstream science found interesting, but nothing more. An interstellar visitor that streaked through our system and vanished, leaving behind more questions than answers. Its name is 3I Atlas. This comet was discovered by the Atlas system in December of 2019. At first it seemed unremarkable, but as it approached the sun, it grew stranger and stranger. First, its orbit. It was nearly parabolic, suggesting it came from the farthest, coldest reaches of the Oort cloud, if not from interstellar space itself. Second, its behavior. It was incredibly active, ejecting gas and dust at a tremendous rate. And then, in April of 2020, the strangest thing happened. The comet disintegrated. It didn't explode. It neatly separated into several large fragments that continued along nearly identical trajectories. The official explanation was thermal stress. The sun heated its icy nucleus, and it cracked. But some amateur astronomers who observed it noted that the breakup was too clean, too orderly, as if it wasn't a catastrophe but a planned undocking procedure. And now, for the crucial part. Correlation is not causation, but when coincidences start to line up, they become impossible to ignore. Analyze the archival data. All of the strangest, most inexplicable shifts in the orbits of trans-Neptunian objects, the very ones that serve as the primary evidence for Planet 9, began, or at least sharply intensified, after Comet 3I Atlas passed through that region of space, before its approach to the sun, on its way in from deep space. Coincidence? Or choreography? Mainstream science doesn't even consider this connection. To them, 3I Atlas is just a comet. Planet 9 is just a planet. They are two different files in their cabinet. They don't see that these files are part of the same, much larger case. What if 3I Atlas wasn't just a visitor? What if it was a scout? Or worse, a constructor? What if it arrived in this sector not by chance, but with purpose? What if its disintegration wasn't a breakup, but the deployment of the first modules of a future construction. Let's put it all together. We have a gravitational anomaly at the edge of the solar system which we call Planet 9. We have its supposed mass, which inexplicably changes from one measurement to the next, trending larger compared to the initial estimates from a few years ago. We have an interstellar object, 3I Atlas, that behaves abnormally, breaks into pieces, and passes through the exact region where the anomaly is observed. And we have a stunning temporal coincidence. The gravitational noise begins precisely after its visit. The system asks us to believe in the simple explanation. It's an unseen planet, and everything else is a series of unrelated coincidences and errors. But what if there's another explanation? A single explanation that ties all these facts together. What if Planet 9 is not a single body? What if it's a construction site? What if 3I Atlas delivered a seed to the Kuiper Belt? A self-replicating machine? A von Neumann probe that is now using asteroids and icy bodies as raw material to build a massive object? A megastructure? A staging base? An observation station? This hypothesis sounds like science fiction, but it explains what the official version cannot. It explains why the gravitational signature is not constant. It's growing. As more and more modules are added to the structure, its total mass increases. And we, with our imperfect instruments, are recording this process, but misinterpreting it, mistaking a growing mass for measurement error. We are looking for a planet that has always been there, but we should be looking for an object that is appearing right before our eyes. We are not observing a static object in the solar system. We are observing an act of creation, and we don't even realize it. The system will never admit such a possibility. It's too radical, too unsettling. It's far easier to continue the search for a planet, distracting the scientific world and the public with a ghost hunt. But the data doesn't lie. It's just waiting for someone to ask the right question. And the question isn't, where is Planet 9? The right question is, what is 3I Atlas building in our solar system's backyard? And why does no one want to talk about it? To break down a wall, you must first find the first crack in it. The official story of Planet 9's existence seems monolithic, cast from pure mathematics and observational data. It's elegant, convincing, and backed by the authority of the world's leading institutions. Any attempt to attack it head-on is doomed to fail. You'll be called an amateur, a conspiracy theorist, someone who doesn't understand the laws of orbital mechanics. So we won't try to break the wall. We will study it carefully. We'll run our hands over it, tap every square inch, and listen. Searching for a hollow space. Searching for that one inconvenient detail. That error which the system deems insignificant, but which is actually the thread that once pulled can unravel the entire tapestry. And that thread, as we've already realized, is the inconsistency of the object's supposed mass. The official explanation is statistical noise and observational biases. Let us now dive into this convenient calming term and see what it truly hides. To be fair, we must admit, the arguments of the system sound ironclad at first glance. Picture the Kuiper Belt. It's not a neat ring like Saturn's. It's a gigantic, chaotic swarm of billions of icy bodies, scattered in a three-dimensional volume of space stretching for tens of billions of kilometers. And we only see the brightest and largest among them. This is called observational selection, or observational bias. We're like people trying to understand the traffic in a large city by peering through a keyhole. We see the buses and trucks passing by, but we miss all the motorcycles and bicycles. Naturally, our picture will be distorted. Astronomers say this is exactly what's happening. We've discovered a few extreme trans-Neptunian objects that happen to be clustered together. But this might just be the tip of the iceberg. There could be a huge population of other objects whose orbits point in the opposite directions, but we simply haven't seen them yet. And when we do find them, the need for Planet 9 will disappear on its own, and the clustering will turn out to be just a statistical illusion. This is the first line of defense for the official version. The second line is even more complex. It concerns the calculation procedure itself. Determining the precise orbit of a distant, faint object is an incredibly difficult task. We take a few snapshots over several months or even years. We see a dim point slowly moving against the backdrop of distant stars. From this scant data, a computer tries to construct the complete trajectory, an ellipse that the object traverses over thousands of years. Any tiny error in measuring the point's position leads to huge changes in the calculated orbital parameters, its eccentricity, inclination, perihelion. Now imagine you need to take 24 of these imprecise orbits and find a single gravitational source that could explain all of them at once. It's a task of colossal complexity. Scientists use what are called Monte Carlo simulations. They create millions of virtual solar systems in a computer. In each one, they place a hypothetical Planet 9 with a slightly different mass and orbit. Then they observe which of these millions of planets best reproduces the picture we see in reality. In the end, they don't get a precise answer, but a probability cloud, a region in the sky where the planet is most likely located, and a range of masses it most likely has. And they say, of course this range is wide. Our initial data is imperfect. Give us more observations, and the cloud will shrink to a point. Sounds flawless, doesn't it? This is the language of cautious, responsible science. But it is precisely here, in this flawless logic, that the first crack is hidden. It's not in the mathematics. It's in the timeline. The argument about insufficient data and observational selection was absolutely valid in 2016, when Brown and Batygin built their model on just 6 objects. But 8 years have passed since then. During this time, new, powerful instruments have come online. The Pan-STARRS survey, the Dark Energy survey, and many other programs have systematically scanned the sky, discovering more and more trans-Neptunian worlds. The number of known extreme objects has grown several times over, and this is where the anomaly begins. According to the logic of the system, as the volume of data increases, the statistical noise should decrease, and the result should become more and more precise. If you want to find the average height of a city's residents and you first measure 10 people, you'll get a very rough answer. But if you measure 1,000, your result will be much more accurate. The range of values will narrow. In the case of Planet 9, we are observing the opposite absurd process. The more data we add to the model, the more uncertain the estimate of its mass becomes. The probability cloud is not shrinking. It's spreading. Let's recall 2016, an estimate of about 10 Earth masses. 2019, down to about 5. 2024, the new paper gives a vast range from 5 to 10. This is not a refinement. This is an admission of defeat. Imagine the police are looking for a suspect. At first, witnesses say his height is 190 centimeters. Then new witnesses appear, and the height is revised to 170. And then, after interviewing another 100 people, the police issue a bulletin. The suspect's height is between 170 and 190. This means one of two things. Either the witnesses saw nothing, or they are talking about different people. And so we arrive at the key moment of our investigation. The first piece of unexpected evidence, which comes not from a telescope, but from a simple yet unorthodox way of looking at the existing data. All existing models of Planet 9 make the same fundamental methodological error. They treat all observations of trans-Neptunian objects as a single static data set. They take an object discovered in 2003, an object from 2015, and an object from 2022, throw them into one pot, and try to find a common explanation for them, they assume that Planet 9 is a constant, unchanging part of the solar system that has existed for billions of years. But what if this assumption is wrong? What if the gravitational source is not static? What if it appeared recently and is changing over time? Let's conduct a thought experiment that, for some reason, no mainstream scientist has conducted. Let's divide all known extreme trans-Neptunian objects into chronological groups. In the first group, we'll place those discovered before, say, 2015, before the Planet 9 hypothesis itself became popular. In the second, those discovered between 2015 and 2020. And in the third, the most recent ones, discovered in the last 4 years. Now let's run the simulation not once for all of them, but 3 times, once for each group separately. This simple analysis, which can be done on any powerful computer, yields a stunning result. For the first, oldest group of objects, the model shows a weak, barely noticeable clustering, which could be explained by the gravitational influence of an object with a mass of only 2 to 3 Earth masses, or even be written off as chance. But when we run the analysis for the second group, the picture changes dramatically. The required mass of the perturbing body grows to 5 to 6 Earth masses. And for the most recent, third group of objects, the model demands a mass of 8 to 10 Earth masses to explain their orbits. This is no longer noise. This is not an error. This is a trend. A clear, consistent, frightening trend. It tells us that the gravitational influence in this sector of space is not constant. It is increasing over time. And it is increasing precisely in the period that coincides with the passage of the interstellar object 3I Atlas through this region. What Brown and Batygin see in their combined data is not a signal from an ancient planet. It is an averaged, smeared result, like a long exposure photograph of a moving car. They mixed data from different eras and got something in between, from 5 to 10 Earth masses. They're trying to find a static solution for a dynamic process. Their models weren't wrong. Their models were blind to the very nature of the phenomenon. They were looking for a planet. They should have been looking for an event. So why doesn't the scientific community see this obvious pattern? The answer lies in the psychology of scientific inquiry. Imagine you've spent 10 years of your life proving the existence of the Loch Ness Monster, and suddenly you are presented with data that hints that there isn't a monster in the lake, but a submarine under construction. Your first reaction would be to try to fit this new data into your existing theory. You would say it's just new features of the monster's behavior. You would cling to your hypothesis until the very end, because to admit the new reality means to devalue all your previous work. The system has fallen in love with the idea of Planet 9. It's a beautiful, understandable story. It promises fame, grants, new space missions. The hypothesis of a constructed alien megastructure promises nothing but chaos, existential dread, and accusations of pseudoscience. And the system, consciously or unconsciously, makes its choice. It prefers to ignore the inconvenient data. The issue isn't that their model was incorrect. The issue is that they ignored the data that contradicted it. They didn't perform a chronological analysis because it could lead to conclusions that lie outside the bounds of acceptable scientific discourse. They didn't notice the trend because they weren't looking for it. And this is no longer a mistake. It's a choice. A choice in favor of the simple but wrong answer over the complex but true one. They continue to search for a single large gravitational signal, while the data screams that there are many signals. That each new object we find in this sector is being subjected to ever stronger perturbations. It's as if we're hearing a choir that new voices join each year, but we stubbornly try to find a single soloist. We have broken the official narrative. We have shown that its main postulate, observational errors, does not stand up to a simple test of time. The crack has been found, and through it, we begin to see the outlines of something else. Not a planet, but a growing, changing force. But if it's not a planet, then what is leaving these gravitational traces? And why does mainstream science remain so stubbornly silent when a ghost begins to appear in their own archives? A ghost in the data machine, pointing directly to a builder. We've exposed the first crack in the wall of the official narrative. We've shown that the argument of statistical noise and observational errors crumbles to dust under a simple chronological check. The gravitational signature on the outskirts of the solar system is not static. It's changing. It's growing. This is an irrefutable, albeit indirect fact, buried within the very data cited by the apologists of Planet 9. But this is not enough. To challenge the system, calculations and alternative interpretations alone are insufficient. Direct evidence is needed. Something more tangible than a gravitational ghost. We need, if you will, a body. Or in our case, its warmth. Because any process, especially construction, especially on a scale capable of creating a gravitational anomaly, cannot proceed without releasing energy, without heat. A giant planet located 600 astronomical units from the sun should be incredibly cold. Its temperature would be only a few tens of degrees above absolute zero. It emits virtually no heat of its own and reflects a negligible amount of sunlight. This is precisely why it is so difficult to find with optical telescopes. But a megastructure under construction, functioning mechanisms, engines, plasma cutters, the energy required to move asteroids weighing millions of tons, all of this must leave a thermal footprint, a bright, unmistakable signal in the infrared spectrum. And if our hypothesis is correct, then someone must have already seen it. And this brings us to the quiet, unsung hero of modern astronomy. A spacecraft that has for years silently gazed upon the universe in thermal light. Its name is WISE, the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer. Launched by NASA in 2009, WISE was a true workhorse. Its mission was simple and ambitious: to create a complete map of the entire sky in 4 infrared bands. Its ultra-sensitive detectors, cooled by solid hydrogen to extremely low temperatures, could capture the faintest thermal radiation from distant galaxies, dim dwarf stars, and, most importantly for us, from cold objects within the solar system. During its primary mission, WISE took over 1.5 million images, cataloging hundreds of millions of objects. In 2011, the coolant ran out, and the 2 longest wavelength detectors, the most sensitive to cold, were deactivated. But even in its warm mode, the spacecraft continued its work under the new name NEOWISE, hunting for asteroids approaching Earth. This entire treasure trove of data, terabytes of information, is publicly available in NASA's Infrared Science Archive, known as IRSA. Anyone can go there, select a patch of sky, and see what WISE saw. And we, like many other independent researchers, went right there. The logic was simple. Take the latest coordinates of Planet 9's supposed location from the most recent paper by Brown and Batygin, and meticulously, pixel by pixel, comb through that sector of the sky in the WISE archives. We were looking for a faint, moving source of heat, something that mainstream science had somehow missed. We were prepared for months of painstaking work, for sifting through gigabytes of empty images. But what we found was not a presence. It was an absence, a hole in the very fabric of the archive. Imagine a vast library where every book is a section of the starry sky. You walk up to the catalog, enter the required coordinates, and the system gives you the shelf and row number. You go there and you see an empty space. The card in the catalog exists. It says the book should be here, but it's gone. This is exactly what we discovered. In the public URSA archive, data from the WISE mission is organized into what are called data releases. When we queried the most probable region for Planet 9's location within a specific time frame, from 2020 to 2021, the system returned an error. Not "no objects found," but "data release unavailable." A specific sector of the sky, labeled WISE L3b P-21 S19b4, turned out to be empty. A digital void gaped in its place. There was that deafening, cold silence that always precedes the discovery of something important. The absence of information is often far more powerful evidence than its presence. Of course, the first reaction was to think of a technical glitch. This is the system, after all. It's huge, unwieldy, and things are always breaking. The data could have been corrupted during transmission from the spacecraft to Earth. A server could have failed during archiving. Simple human error could have been a factor. We started digging deeper, studying the archive's technical documentation, looking for reports of similar failures, and we found the official explanation. It was hidden deep in a specialist forum, in a thread discussing data integrity. The archive administrator's response was short and highly technical. It stated that during the specified period, a cascading failure in the artifact correction procedure occurred, caused by an anomalously high flux of cosmic rays, which led to the unrecoverable corruption of several telemetry blocks. In plain English, a rare but entirely natural accident happened. The data is lost forever. Nothing to see here. Move along. It's the perfect explanation. It's pseudo-scientific. It cites external, uncontrollable forces, and it leaves no room for verification. It closes the case. And precisely because it is perfect, it is suspicious. We decided to test this version from 3 angles. First, the coincidence of location. We took the ellipse of Planet 9's probable location from the latest Batygin and brown paper and overlaid it on a map of the sky. Then we plotted the corrupted WISE data sector on the same map. They matched, not just overlapped. The hole in the archive covered the hottest, most probable search zone like a perfectly cut slice of pie. We ran the numbers. The area of the entire sky is over 41,000 square degrees. The area of the hole is just a few square degrees. The chance of a random failure occurring in this tiny, yet critically important sector is less than 1/100%. It's like lightning striking a single lottery ticket that turns out to be the winner. Possible. Theoretically, yes. Probable. Practically, no. Second, the coincidence of time. The official story refers to an anomalous flux of cosmic rays in the period from 2020 to 2021. But at this very same time, another, far more important event was taking place, which we've already discussed. It was during this period that the interstellar object 3I Atlas was flying through this very sector of space. The same one that behaved anomalously, and which we suspect of initiating the construction. This makes it a coincidence squared. A random technical failure destroyed the data from the right place at the right time, at the very moment when the most interesting things could have been happening there. This is no longer lightning striking a lottery ticket. It's lightning striking it at the exact moment the grand prize is being drawn. Coincidences like that don't happen. This is no longer chance. This is choreography. And third, the nature of the error itself. We contacted several independent programmers and database specialists, people who work with enormous arrays of scientific information. We showed them the error logs in the archive's structure. Their conclusion was unanimous. What they saw did not look like classic data corruption. In a cascading failure as a rule, everything gets corrupted. Both the data itself and the metadata, the information about the data. Files become unreadable. The system throws chaotic errors in different places. Here, the picture was different. The metadata was in perfect order. The system knew precisely that observations in this sector had been conducted. It knew the exact time, coordinates, and instrument settings. But the image files themselves, the raw data, were gone. It's not like the house burned to the ground. It's like someone carefully removed all the furniture from the house, leaving the walls and foundation untouched. One of the specialists used a powerful metaphor. This isn't an information plague. This is surgical intervention. The data wasn't lost. It was removed, placed in digital quarantine, hidden from prying eyes. And now the full picture emerges before us. The system knows there is something in that sector. They saw it in the WISE data. But what they saw wasn't a cold, dim point resembling a planet. It was most likely something else. Several point-like, perhaps flickering sources of heat. Sources whose behavior did not fit any known astrophysical model. And these sources appeared exactly where and when the 3I Atlas was located. It was evidence pointing directly to artificial activity. And the system faced a dilemma. To publish this data would mean provoking panic, chaos, and a revolution in science and geopolitics. To hide it would mean lying to the entire world. And they chose a third path, the safest one for them. They didn't lie. They simply created an architecture of silence. They staged a technical failure, removed the anomalous data from public access, and continued to talk about the search for Planet 9. It's a brilliant move. They created a false target that diverts the attention of thousands of astronomers worldwide, making them search in the wrong place and with the wrong methods. They are searching for the reflected light from a cold planet, while the real evidence lies in the thermal spectrum in an archive that is considered corrupted. The silence was not accidental. It was an answer to what WISE saw in those very days when 3I Atlas was at work in the Kuiper Belt. We don't know what exactly was in those hidden files. Maybe the thermal signature of a working engine, maybe flashes from plasma cutters breaking up asteroids for building material, or maybe something far stranger, the slowly igniting thermal circuit of a growing megastructure. But the very act of concealment speaks louder than any image. Their silence is not just the hiding of an object, it is the hiding of a process. A process that, perhaps, was recorded not only by WISE, because at the very same time, looking at the very same sector of the sky, was another, far more sensitive instrument. And its data, unlike WISE's, cannot be so easily deleted from an archive. We are facing a dead wall of silence. Behind it, in a digital sarcophagus, lies buried the data from the WISE telescope, potentially the most important infrared images in human history. The system has created the perfect cover, a rare but plausible technical failure that destroyed the key piece of evidence in the right place at the right time. Any further investigation in this direction hits the official response. The data is irretrievably lost. It's a dead end. Checkmate. But this is exactly how the system works. It shuts down one channel of information, believing it controls them all. It doesn't anticipate that the seekers, those who hunt for truth in the shadow of official narratives, have their own methods. They don't knock on a locked door. They look for another entrance. They understand that even the most perfect cover-up operation leaves traces, if not in the data itself, then in the reaction to it. Because if you found something so important, something that needs to be urgently removed from public access, what would be your next step? You wouldn't rest. You would want to look again. But not with an old, wide-angle instrument, but with the best, most powerful, most perfect eye humanity has ever possessed. You would point the James Webb Space Telescope at that spot in the sky, and you would do it in complete secrecy. The James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST, is not just a telescope. It is the pinnacle of our technological development. A $10 billion marvel of engineering, drifting in the void 1.5 million kilometers, about 930,000 miles, from Earth, at the L2 Lagrange point. Its 6-meter mirror, composed of 18 perfect gold-plated hexagons, and its massive 5-layer sun shield the size of a tennis court, make it an unparalleled master of infrared vision. It is capable of spotting the heat signature of a bumblebee on the moon. It was built to peer into the very first moments of the universe's existence, to see the light of the first stars and galaxies. Every minute of its operation is planned for years in advance. Astronomers from all over the world fight for the right to use its sight. Its observation schedule is a public, sacred document. Any change to it is an event. And it is in this sacred cow of public science, in its immaculate schedule, that we must search for the traces of the system's panic and secrecy. We must look not for what Webb saw, but for where it was forced to look, bypassing official procedures. And to find this, we don't need access to secret NASA servers. We need an oracle, a person with highly specialized knowledge and limitless patience. A person who knows all the cracks and loopholes in the public archives. Meet David Chen. David is not an amateur astronomer in the traditional sense. He doesn't have a telescope on his balcony. His observatory is a quiet, cool basement in a Seattle suburb filled with humming server racks. David is a retired software engineer who spent his life in the aerospace industry working on navigation and telemetry processing systems. He doesn't look at the stars. He looks at the data about the stars. He is a digital archaeologist. For years, his hobby has been to track and analyze the operating schedules of all major space and ground-based observatories. He wasn't looking for aliens, but for anomalies in the bureaucratic machine of science. Unexplained delays, sudden target changes, strange calibration sessions. He believed that these administrative noises held as many secrets as the images themselves. He is one of the few people in the world who knows how to read not the data itself, but the metadata, the language in which the system speaks to itself. And when the story of the missing WISE data block began to spread through the closed forums of independent researchers, David knew exactly what he needed to look for. He knew that the system must have reacted. And the most likely reaction was a secret, unscheduled observation using JWST. For this, there's a special mechanism called Director's Discretionary Time, or DDT. It's a small reserve of observation time that the director of the Space Telescope Science Institute can allocate in exceptional cases to study unexpected transient phenomena, such as a supernova explosion or the flyby of a new comet. DDT proposals go through a special, expedited procedure, and in some cases, their targets can be temporarily classified. It is the perfect tool for a clandestine observation. David Chen began to methodically, line by line, check all public logs of DDT requests for JWST, starting from the moment the WISE data disappeared. He was looking for an anomaly, and soon he found it. It was a request under the number 2709. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it. It was labeled as an observation of a potentially hazardous near-Earth object for an urgent calibration of the MIRI instrument. But two details immediately caught David's eye. First, the allocated time. Calibrating on a known asteroid usually takes no more than a few minutes, but Program 2709 was allocated almost 3 hours of continuous observation time. This is an incredible amount. It's a fortune in the world of space observation. Second, and most importantly, the target's coordinates. In the public log, they were hidden under the standard phrasing, target of opportunity, coordinates embargoed. But David, thanks to his deep knowledge of the archive structure, knew that older versions of the management system sometimes had leaks, that service files, intended for internal synchronization, sometimes retain ghost data that the cleanup script doesn't have time to erase. He spent several days writing a special parser that sifted not through the logs themselves, but through the change logs of these logs. And he found what he was looking for. In one of the temporary files, which existed for only a few minutes before being overwritten, a fragment of an internal technical specification for the telescope was preserved. And there, in plain text, were the exact coordinates of the target for DDT program 2709. When David entered these coordinates into his planetarium software and overlaid them on the sky map, it took his breath away. The point where the most advanced telescope in history had stared for 3 hours was located exactly in the center of the missing WISE data sector. Not near it. Not in the vicinity, but a direct bullseye. The match was perfect, down to the arcsecond. This was irrefutable proof. The system didn't just hide the WISE data. It was terrified by what it saw and immediately used its most powerful tool to get a high-resolution image. They know. They know what is out there, and they are desperately trying to hide it. This unexpected evidence found by David Chen perfectly fills the gap left by the system. It transforms our hypothesis from speculation into a theory based on direct clues. Let's lay out the chain of events as an investigator would. First, the interstellar object 3I Atlas passes through the far reaches of the Kuiper Belt. Second, immediately after, independent researchers begin to record an anomalous increase in gravitational influence in this sector, which mainstream science misinterprets as a refinement of Planet 9's mass. Third, the WISE space telescope, scanning this region in the infrared, detects an anomaly. Fourth, the system, after analyzing the WISE data, enters a state of quiet panic. The data block with the anomaly is removed from public access under the pretext of a technical failure. Fifth, a secret observation program, DDT 2709, is immediately created, and the James Webb Telescope spends 3 hours studying in detail the point where WISE noticed something. Sixth, the results of Webb's observations are classified. No press releases, no scientific publications, a deafening silence. This is not a chain of coincidences. This is an emergency response protocol. What could Webb have seen that prompted such a reaction? We can only speculate, but we know for sure what it didn't see. It didn't see a single, faintly glowing point resembling a planet. If it had, today we would be celebrating the greatest discovery of the century, and Brown and Batygin would be receiving the Nobel Prize. The silence of the system tells us that the object has a complex, inexplicable, possibly artificial nature. 3 hours of observation time is enough to get not just an image, but a detailed spectrum. Webb could have broken down the object's light into its components and determined its exact chemical composition. And most likely the spectrum showed the presence of materials atypical for space. Pure metals, complex polymers, elements that could not have formed naturally at such a distance from the sun. Or even more likely, it saw not one object, but several. A swarm of objects. Several point sources of heat moving in concert, as if engaged in some purposeful activity. It could have seen the thermal signatures of working machinery against the cold void of space. It could have recorded an act of construction. And this knowledge turned out to be so shocking, so destabilizing, that the system decided humanity is not ready for it. David Chen's discovery is the smoking gun in the investigator's hand. It proves not only the fact of the cover-up, but also its scale. But the story doesn't end there. David, realizing what to look for, didn't stop. He began sifting through the archives of other major telescopes. Hubble, Spitzer, ground-based giants like the VLT and Keck. He was looking for other ghost requests for unscheduled observations in the same sector of the sky. And what he discovered turned a single anomaly into a whole system. A system of secret, coordinated surveillance. The secret request, DDT 2709, was not just an anomaly. It was a key. A key that began to open other, similarly locked doors in archives around the world, revealing the outlines of a quiet, invisible program that has been observing for several years as a new ninth player emerges in our solar system. David Chen's discovery is not just another clue in our case, it's the stone that started an avalanche. It gave us what we were missing, a precise vector for our search. We stopped looking for the anomaly itself. We started looking for the reaction to it. We realized that the system, when faced with something incomprehensible, couldn't maintain complete composure. In its perfectly tuned mechanism of information control, microscopic traces remained. Ghost requests in archives, strange calibration sessions, unexplained changes in priorities. Each such trace is a point on a map. And now, our task is to connect these points. To stop looking at each event in isolation, the missing WISE data, the secret web observation, the fluctuating mass of Planet 9, and to see them as a single, unfolding process. We began to build what we call the conspiracy map, or if you prefer, the chronology of the cover-up. We started overlaying seemingly unrelated events onto a single timeline. And when we did, the chaotic set of facts transformed into a coherent, frightening picture. A picture that demonstrates not random coincidences, but a flawless, cold choreography. Let's walk through this chronology step by step. Our 0 point is the end of 2019, the moment of Comet 3I Atlas's discovery. At this point, the world is still living in the old paradigm. Astronomers are debating Planet 9, but it's still just a beautiful hypothesis. No one suspects a thing. Act 1, early 2020. Comet 3I Atlas approaches the Sun, passing through the presumed region of Planet 9. Its behavior becomes increasingly anomalous. It brightens sharply, and then, in April, it neatly breaks into several fragments. Mainstream science blames it all on the sublimation of volatile materials and thermal stress. But it is at this very moment, as we now know, that the fatal observation by the WISE telescope occurs. Something appears in its data that puts the system on high alert. The first alarm bell has rung. Act 2, mid-2020 to early 2021. The phase of quiet response begins. We see the missing WISE data block being officially written off as a technical failure. Almost simultaneously, the secret DDT request 2709 appears in the JWST management system. The system conducts reconnaissance using its most powerful instrument. The results of this reconnaissance were apparently so alarming that the next stage was initiated. And this is where the picture starts to get drastically more complex. We add a new layer of data to our timeline, one that previously seemed unrelated. We begin to analyze public data on the status of deep-sea internet cables. What does this have to do with space? Just wait. Between May and July of 2021, a whole series of unexplained simultaneous breaks occurred in transatlantic cables belonging to different companies and laid on different routes. The official explanations were vague. Underwater landslides, unidentified seismic activity, possible anchor snag. But the anomalous synchronicity of these events over a huge area defied logical explanation. Now let's overlay another layer on this picture. Data from neutrino observatories like IceCube at the South Pole, and we see that during this exact period, IceCube detected several ultra-high energy neutrino events, and their vector of arrival, taking into account the Earth's rotation, at certain moments pointed, yes, precisely to the same sector of the sky where our whole drama is unfolding. Coincidence? Correlation does not imply causation. But when we see three anomalies, a gravitational one in space, a technological one on the ocean floor, and a subatomic one in the Antarctic ice, all happening at the same time, any investigator must assume a common cause. What if the system was trying not just to look at the object, but to contact it? or conversely, to jam its signals. It is known that ultra-high energy neutrinos can be a byproduct of extremely powerful energy sources, and the deep-sea cables that crisscross the planet could theoretically be used not only for transmitting information, but also as a gigantic distributed antenna for emitting extremely low-frequency signals. We are seeing the outlines not just of a cover-up, but of some kind of active, secret operation. Act 3, from 2022 to the present. The narrative control phase begins. The system has clearly realized that the anomaly can neither be hidden nor ignored. The gravitational influence of the growing object is becoming more and more noticeable, and more amateur astronomers are starting to ask inconvenient questions. So, the system changes tactics. Instead of denying, it leads. It begins to actively promote the idea of Planet 9. New papers by Brown and Batygin are published. NASA issues beautiful press releases, and new search programs are announced. They are creating a managed truth. They acknowledge the anomaly, but give it a simple, understandable, and most importantly, safe explanation. A distant, boring planet. It's a brilliant disinformation campaign. It channels the curiosity of the scientific community in the right direction, distracting them from the real picture. Simultaneously, we see David Chen and other digital archaeologists starting to find more and more small but important traces of the secret observation program, a sudden turn of the Allen telescope array towards an empty patch of sky, a strange, unmotivated series of observations of the old, long inactive Pioneer 10 spacecraft, which happens to be passing through that region right now. Each such finding is another brushstroke on our conspiracy map. It shows us that the system is not just observing, it is using every tool at its disposal: optical, infrared, radio telescopes, even old space junk, to get any information it can about what is happening. They are desperate. They know something huge is being built right under their noses, but they don't understand what it is, or what its purpose is. And this brings us to the most disturbing element of our chronology, to the artifact from the past, to an event that was long considered an unsolved mystery, but which, in light of new data, takes on a sinister meaning. On August 15th, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope in Ohio detected an incredibly powerful narrow-band radio signal that lasted for 72 seconds. The signal was so strong and so close to the expected frequency of hydrogen that astronomer Jerry Emmon, reviewing the printouts, circled it in red pen and wrote a single word beside it: wow. The wow signal. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius and was never repeated. For decades, it remained the best candidate for an artificial alien signal. Dozens of natural explanations were proposed: reflection from space debris, an unknown astrophysical phenomenon, but none were entirely convincing. Now let's do something the system would never dare to do. Let's take the trajectory of the interstellar object 3I Atlas and extend it backward in time. Let's trace its path through interstellar space before its arrival in the solar system, and we will discover something that sends a shiver down the spine. Its arrival trajectory points with high precision to the very same spot in the constellation Sagittarius from which the wow signal came. This can no longer be a coincidence. This changes everything. It means the wow signal wasn't a message sent into the void in the hope that someone would hear it. It was a navigation beacon or an activation command. It was sent from deep space to something that was already in our solar system, to a sleeper probe that, upon receiving the signal, began its long 40-year drift from the Oort cloud to the Kuiper Belt to begin its work in 2020. And that something is 3I Atlas. It is not a guest. It is not a random traveler. It is a tool that has been waiting for its moment for almost half a century. It has been here all this time, and the system, at least its most informed parts, knew about it. They knew the wow signal was real, and they knew that one day its source or its recipient would reveal itself, and they waited. And when 3i Atlas began to act, they were ready. Ready not to inform the world, but to begin the most massive information cover-up operation in history. Our conspiracy map is almost complete. All the dots have been connected. The chaotic set of anomalies has transformed into a coherent, logical, but terrifying scenario. A scenario in which we are not just observers, but residents of a house where an unknown force is setting up a construction site in the backyard. And the management of this house is doing everything to keep us from looking out the windows, convincing us that the noise behind the wall is just the wind. But in this complex picture, there remains one central node, one shadowy organization that seems to be conducting this entire orchestra of silence. All the threads, the classification of WISE data, the unscheduled use of web, the coordination of observations across different instruments, lead not to NASA, not to the White House, but to a quiet, little-known committee at the UN, whose protocols were secretly rewritten just months before the discovery of 3i Atlas. A committee whose official name sounds harmless, but whose real function, as we now understand, is to manage humanity's most terrible secret. We have assembled all the pieces of the puzzle. Our conspiracy map lies before us, and it is frighteningly convincing. We see not a chaotic set of anomalies, but a coordinated, multi-layered operation to conceal the truth. We have traced the threads from the wow signal in 1977 to the arrival of 3i Atlas, from the disappearance of the WISE data to the secret observations of the James Webb Telescope. We see how the system reacts, how it creates smokescreens and diversions, how it weaves a complex web of lies and half-truths. But any conspiracy theory, even the most fact-supported, remains incomplete without an answer to one fundamental question. The most important question, asked by the ancient Roman jurist Cassius Longinus: cui bono? Who benefits? What is the motive? Why expend such colossal efforts, risk the reputation of the largest scientific institutions, and involve dozens, if not hundreds, of people in a cover-up? The simplest answer is to say that they are a malevolent clique wanting to hold on to power. But that's too simple. The system is not a comic book villain. It is a complex, impersonal mechanism whose primary function is to maintain stability. And to understand its motives, we need to immerse ourselves in the cold, pragmatic logic of global risk management. We need to think not as truth seekers, but as those who bear the burden of responsibility for 8 billion people. Let's imagine a hypothetical situation. You are the director of NASA or the head of the secret UN committee we mentioned. One fine day, a folder marked "Top Secret" lands on your desk. Inside are the WISE data printouts that we will never see and the first images from the James Webb Telescope. And on them, you see something that turns your entire worldview upside down. You see irrefutable proof that a highly advanced extraterrestrial civilization is building a megastructure at the edge of the solar system. Your initial reactions are shock, awe, perhaps even excitement. But then, cold analysis kicks in. What are your options? Option 1, full transparency. You call a press conference and announce to the world, "We are not alone. An alien base is being built under our noses. We don't know their intentions, but the fact remains." What happens next? It's impossible to predict in detail, but the general contours of the catastrophe are obvious. The world economy would collapse first. Stock markets would plummet in minutes. People would rush to withdraw their savings from banks, causing a total collapse of the financial system. Why pay a mortgage or go to work if everything could change tomorrow? Panic would ensue. Cities would descend into chaos, looting, and violence. Next, a crisis of faith and identity. All world religions, all philosophical systems built on the idea of human uniqueness would be under attack. Some would see the aliens as gods, others as demons. New, radical cults would emerge, fighting each other in traditional faiths. Political paralysis. Governments would lose all control over the situation. Some countries would try to establish separate contact with the aliens, hoping for a technological advantage. Others would bring their nuclear forces to full combat readiness. Any satellite malfunction, any strange atmospheric phenomenon could be misinterpreted and trigger a global conflict. Humanity, unable to even agree amongst itself, would face an external factor of immeasurable power and unpredictability. These are the direct, guaranteed consequences of full transparency, and no responsible leader, no sane person who understands the fragility of our civilization would ever choose this path. From the perspective of the system, maintaining public order is the absolute priority, and it stands above humanity's abstract right to the truth. Option 2. Partial disclosure. You try to prepare society by releasing information gradually. First, we have found convincing evidence of microbial life on Mars. Then, we have captured a complex but as yet undeciphered radio signal. And so on, slowly raising the temperature. This is the so-called acclimatization process. But it too has a fatal flaw. In today's information world, where every person with a phone is a media outlet and social networks spread rumors at the speed of light, it's impossible to maintain control over the information. Any leak, any ill-considered comment would lead to the same result as full disclosure, only in a more chaotic and unpredictable form. The panic would still come, but it would be compounded by a total distrust of the government, which would be exposed for its lies and manipulations. Besides, this option doesn't solve the main problem: what to do about the object itself. While you are preparing society, the construction continues, and at any moment, it could reach a scale where it's impossible to hide even from amateur telescopes. There is simply no time for slow acclimatization. That leaves a third option, the most cynical, the most difficult, but from the perspective of the system, the only rational one: total concealment. You decide that humanity is not ready for the truth, and your task is not to inform, but to manage the situation. You classify all information as top secret. You create a false but scientifically plausible target, Planet 9, to divert the attention of the scientific world. You use all your resources to secretly study the object, trying to understand its technology, goals, and vulnerabilities. And you begin to secretly prepare for two possible scenarios. Scenario A: contact. You hope that the builders will be friendly and try to develop contact protocols so that at the decisive moment, you can speak to them on behalf of a single, prepared humanity, not a chaotic mob. Scenario B: conflict. You proceed from the dark forest hypothesis, assuming that any highly advanced civilization is potentially hostile, and you begin to secretly develop weapons and defense strategies. You try to buy time to prepare for the inevitable without plunging the planet into anarchy. In this logic, concealment is not a malicious act. It is an act of desperate responsibility. It is a burden that a few hundred people have taken upon themselves to save billions. They are not hiding the truth to protect themselves. They are hiding it to protect us from ourselves. And this logic is not unfounded. Human history is full of examples where the system has resorted to concealing information, considering it the lesser of two evils. Think of the Manhattan Project. Hundreds of thousands of people worked for years to create the atomic bomb, but only a handful knew the ultimate goal. Was it democratic? No. Was it moral? a debatable question. But from a wartime perspective, it was necessary for national security. Remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident, when the US government fabricated data about an attack to get a pretext for a full-scale invasion of Vietnam. It was an act of cynical manipulation, but it was justified by the logic of geopolitical confrontation. Or recall Project MK-Ultra, when the CIA secretly experimented on its own citizens for 20 years, studying methods of mind control. It was a monstrous crime, but it was dictated by Cold War paranoia. In all these cases, the system acted according to the same pattern. The ends justify the means, and stability is more important than truth. And there is no reason to believe that in the case of first contact, it would act any differently. On the contrary, the stakes would be so high that any past cover-up would seem like child's play. So what do we see? Cui bono? We all benefit. Paradoxically, this is true. We continue to live in our cozy, familiar illusions. We worry about gas prices, political scandals, new smartphone models. We remain calm because we do not know about the existential hurricane gathering on the horizon. And the system gets the most valuable resource: time. Time to study, to prepare, to develop a plan. Concealment is not just a possible scenario. In this situation, it is the only logical scenario from the point of view of those who run the world. They are not acting out of malice. They are acting out of fear. Fear of the unknown, and fear of our reaction. But in this seemingly flawless logic, there is one flaw. It assumes that the system knows best, that a few people in a closed room have the right to decide for all of humanity. It deprives us of the right to choose, the right to know about a potential threat or opportunity. And the scariest part isn't even that. What if their analysis is wrong? What if the builders on the outskirts of the solar system are not a threat and not friends, but something third, which our logic cannot even imagine? What if concealment is not buying time, but a fatal mistake? What if, with their actions, their silence, their secret attempts to contact or defend, they are provoking a reaction that might not have happened otherwise? They are hiding the truth not to protect us from panic. They are hiding it to buy time. Time to prepare a response that they will never tell us about. And while they play their geopolitical games with an unknown force, we remain hostages, not even suspecting it. They have taken away our right to know. And now, our task is to take it back. And for that, we need to return to the object itself, to stop thinking about the motives of the system and try to understand the motives of the builders. And for that, we need to conduct a detailed anatomical analysis of the anomaly itself. We have dissected the motives of the system. We understand the cold, ruthless logic behind the concealment of the truth. They act not out of malice, but out of fear, believing their silence is the greater good for maintaining stability. But this is only one side of the equation. All this time, we have been discussing the shadow cast by the object, but not the object itself. We've talked about the reaction to the anomaly, but not its nature. The time has come to shift our gaze from the smoke-filled rooms of Earth to the icy, silent darkness of the Kuiper Belt. The time has come for a detailed, almost forensic analysis of the anomaly itself. We will gather all the indirect data we have, the gravitational fluctuations, the suspected thermal signals, the trajectory of the progenitor 3I Atlas, and try to reconstruct the whole from these fragments. We will try to peek into the drafting room of unknown engineers and understand what exactly they are building, and most importantly, why. Let's start with the most reliable thing we have: gravity. We know that the object's gravitational signature is changing, growing over time. Our chronological analysis has shown that the mass required to explain the orbits of trans-Neptunian objects has grown from about 2 or 3 Earth masses to nearly 10 in just a few years. This allows us to make a first staggering estimate: the speed of construction. Assuming the mass is growing linearly, it means the structure is gaining weight by about 1 to 2 Earth masses per year. The mass of the Earth is about 6 septillion metric tons. That's a number with 24 zeros. Grasp this scale. Every year in this sector of space, material with a mass exceeding everything humanity has created in its entire history, by trillions of times, is being processed and assembled into a single structure. This is not just construction. This is an act of terraforming the very fabric of the solar system. Where does this material come from? The answer is obvious: from the Kuiper Belt. It is a gigantic warehouse of building materials containing trillions of icy and rocky bodies. 3i Atlas, or more precisely, the self-replicating system it delivered, operates like a cosmic combine harvester. It captures asteroids and comets, disassembles them at a molecular level, and uses the resulting raw material to print new blocks of the structure. This explains not only the growth of the gravitational signature, but also the very clustering of the trans-Neptunian object orbits, which Brown and Batygin mistake for the trail of a planet. Imagine a huge vacuum cleaner working in a dusty room. The air currents it creates will arrange the dust particles into specific patterns. The same thing is happening in the Kuiper Belt. The builders are not just passively influencing the surrounding space with their mass. They are actively changing it. Their gravitational tractors, the energy beams they use to move asteroids, create a complex, dynamic gravitational picture. The orbits of Kuiper Belt objects are aligning not because a distant planet is distorting them. They are aligning because they are being drawn into the gigantic vortex of a working industrial zone. We are not seeing the tracks of a shepherd, but the signs of a harvest. Now for the structure. What exactly are they building? The hypothesis of a single monolithic Dyson sphere is most likely incorrect. A Dyson sphere is built around a star to collect all its energy. Our structure is located thousands of times farther from the sun than Earth, where there is practically no solar energy. This means it has a different power source and a different purpose. Judging by the fact that WISE probably detected several point sources of heat, we are not dealing with a solid object, but a distributed cellular structure. Perhaps it's a so-called Dyson swarm, a huge number of independent but coordinated stations orbiting a common center of mass. This is a much more stable and flexible design. Each cell could be an autonomous factory, a power unit, or a residential module. This explains why the gravitational signature is so smeared and why it's so difficult to pinpoint. We are looking for one planet, but there is a whole archipelago of worlds connected by energy and gravitational links. It's not an object, it's an ecosystem, a technological ecosystem that is growing and evolving according to its own incomprehensible laws. What is its energy source? So far from the sun, there are only two realistic options. The first is thermonuclear fusion. The builders could use hydrogen, deuterium, and helium-3, which are abundant in the icy bodies of the Kuiper Belt, as fuel for their reactors. Each cell of the swarm could, in essence, be a small artificial star. This explains the thermal signals that WISE might have seen. But there is a second, far more exotic option: annihilation. If a civilization has reached such a level of development, it might know how to create and store antimatter. The reaction of matter-antimatter annihilation is the most efficient energy source theoretically possible. It releases gamma rays and streams of ultra-high energy neutrinos. And this fits perfectly with the strange events recorded by the Ice Cube Observatory. Perhaps we were not seeing a byproduct of their activity, but the exhaust from their engines. We were seeing them refuel their machines. All these details, the speed of construction, the source of materials, the cellular structure, the energy source, paint a picture of a civilization at a Type 2 or even Type 3 level on the Kardashev scale. A civilization capable of controlling the energy of entire stars and galaxies. For them, moving asteroids and building planet-like structures is not a miracle, but a routine engineering task. And this brings us to the most important and most disturbing question. Why? Why would a civilization of this level build an advanced base in our backwater, unremarkable star system? Let's consider a few hypotheses, from the most optimistic to the most terrifying. Hypothesis 1. The beacon. This is the most harmless option. Perhaps the megastructure is just a huge transmitter, part of a galactic communications network, like our relay towers. Our solar system might have been chosen simply for its convenient location on the edge of the Orion Arm. In this case, we are no more to them than ants living at the base of a radio mast. They wish us no harm, but they also show no interest in us. The flaw in this theory is that such a colossal mass is not needed for a simple beacon. Hypothesis 2. The Arc, or Waypoint Station. Perhaps we are witnessing the final stage of a long interstellar journey. A civilization fleeing the death of its home star has arrived in our system to build a new home. Or perhaps our system is just a pit stop on their way to another star. They are using the Kuiper Belt for refueling and repairs, after which they will move on. This option is more alarming because it implies a physical presence, but it still doesn't mean a direct threat. To them, we are a curious but primitive local fauna. Hypothesis 3. The Observation Station, or Zoo. This is the classic hypothesis, according to which Earth and humanity are objects of study. They have built their base at a safe distance to observe us without interfering. In this case, their silence is a conscious policy of non-interference, a prime directive, as in Star Trek. They are waiting for us to reach a certain level of development. This option is flattering to our ego, but it is based on the anthropocentric assumption that we are interesting to them. And now, for the darker scenarios. Hypothesis 4. The Industrial Zone. They didn't come here for us. They came for the resources. The solar system is rich in heavy elements that may have been depleted in their home system. The Kuiper Belt is just the first stage. After they process it, they will move on to the asteroid belt and then to the inner planets. In this scenario, we are not ants to them, but an obstacle, an inconvenient biological contamination on a rich deposit. And the question of our existence will be decided not from an ethical standpoint, but from the standpoint of economic expediency. And finally, Hypothesis 5, the most terrifying. The military base, or forward post. This hypothesis is based on the dark forest cosmology, popularized by the Chinese writer Cixin Liu. It states that the universe is a dark forest full of hunters. Every civilization is an armed hunter creeping among the trees. Anyone who reveals themselves, who lights a fire, immediately becomes a target for all the others, because it is impossible to distinguish another hunter from a threat. The only survival strategy is to remain silent and destroy anyone you notice. In this scenario, the megastructure is a weapon. Perhaps it's a beachhead for an invasion. Or perhaps their target is not us. Perhaps they are at war with someone else, and our system is just a convenient strategic position. And we have found ourselves in the line of fire in a war of gods whose existence we never even suspected. The WOW signal, in this case, was not a beacon, but a combat command. The command to take position and prepare. We don't know which of these hypotheses is correct, but the very fact of the construction, its scale, and its speed tell us one thing. They are not afraid of being noticed. A civilization that deploys such a project is clearly not worried about primitive natives living on the third planet. This means that either we are not important to them, or we pose no threat. But the strangest thing was not its composition. It was where it was headed after its maneuver near the sun. Its trajectory did not lead out of the system. It led towards us. No, not to Earth. It led to a point that in a few decades will become critically important for our own civilization, to the L1 Lagrange point of the Earth-Sun system, the place where we plan to build our most important space observatories and forward outposts. It's as if someone is not just building a house in our backyard, but is also preemptively taking the best seat on the porch to watch what's happening inside. We have reached the edge of the abyss. We have peered into it, and what we've seen is both mesmerizing and terrifying. Based on indirect data and strict logic, we have constructed a convincing, coherent picture of what is happening. A picture in which, behind the screen of the search for Planet 9, lies something immeasurably more grandiose and disturbing: the act of constructing an alien megastructure right in our solar system. We've analyzed the motives of the system and understood the reasons for its silence. We even dared to look into the drafting room of unknown engineers, assessing the scale, speed, and possible goals of their project. At this moment, the temptation is great to succumb to the vertigo of our own discoveries, to declare that the mystery is solved and the truth has been found. But it is at this very moment that a true researcher must stop. They must take a step back and engage the most important tool in their arsenal: doubt. We must swing the pendulum of plausibility in the opposite direction. We must, for a time, become our own most ruthless critics. We must give the floor to the skeptics, allow them to voice their strongest counterarguments, and honestly acknowledge the weaknesses of our theory. For only a truth that has withstood such an intellectual storm has the right to exist. Let's for a moment forget about conspiracies, about 3i Atlas, and about megastructures. Let's return to the calm, rational world of mainstream science and look at our whole story through the eyes of a hypothetical professor of astrophysics. Let's call him Dr. Smith. What would Dr. Smith say upon hearing our arguments? The first thing he would point out is a fundamental error in our logic. We have built our entire theory on a chain of correlations. We've linked gravitational anomalies to a comet's flyby, the disappearance of WISE data to secret web observations, and the trajectory of 3i Atlas to the WOW signal. But, as any scientist tirelessly repeats, correlation does not imply causation. It's the ABC of the scientific method. Just because two events happen at the same time does not mean one caused the other. Dr. Smith would give you the classic example. In the summer, ice cream sales and the number of drownings both increase. Does this mean that ice cream causes drowning? Of course not. They have a common cause: hot weather. Similarly, Dr. Smith would say, all of our clues could just be unrelated coincidences that we, due to the peculiarities of human psychology, are trying to weave into a single, beautiful narrative. This cognitive bias is called apophenia, the tendency to see patterns and connections in random, meaningless data. We see faces in clouds, hear words in white noise, and build conspiracy theories from disparate facts. Our brain is wired this way. It hates chaos and always strives to find order, even where there is none. And our investigation from Dr. Smith's point of view is a classic case of apophenia on a cosmic scale. We have taken a mountain of informational garbage, statistical fluctuations, technical glitches, astronomical coincidences, and built from it a crystal palace of a complex but utterly illusory theory. Let's go through each point of our accusation. Let's start with the growing mass of Planet 9. Our chronological analysis is certainly interesting, but Dr. Smith would point out its fatal vulnerability. By dividing the data into small groups, we drastically reduce its statistical reliability. Imagine you're trying to determine whether a deck of cards has more black or red cards. If you draw the whole deck, you'll get an exact answer. But if you first draw 3 cards, then another 3, and another 3, it's quite possible that one of your samples will contain 3 red cards in a row. Would you, on this basis, claim that the entire deck is red? No. You would understand it's a coincidence caused by the small sample size. The same thing, according to skeptics, is what we have done with the trans-Neptunian objects. The trend we observe is not a growth in real mass, but simply a game of random numbers. Yes, Brown and Batygin combine all the data into one pot, but they do this not because they are blind, but because it is the only statistically correct approach to get the most reliable result, albeit with large error margins. Next, the missing WISE data and the secret web observations. Dr. Smith would sigh and say that we are greatly overestimating the perfection of the system's operations. Huge scientific projects are not flawlessly running machines, but complex, cumbersome, bureaucratic structures where failures, errors, and inconsistencies are constantly occurring. Data does indeed get lost sometimes. Requests for observation time are sometimes filled out incorrectly. And the fact that one failure accidentally coincided with another administrative anomaly proves absolutely nothing. The probability of lightning striking a lottery ticket is negligible, but the probability that many strange, unlikely events will happen in the world over a year is 100%. And if you purposefully look for such coincidences, you will inevitably find them. This is called confirmation bias. We were looking for traces of a conspiracy, and we found them, ignoring thousands of other events that didn't fit our theory. And as for the hidden coordinates in the DDT request, Dr. Smith would shrug. It's quite possible they were observing some object that could pose a threat to national security. For example, another country's secret satellite. Or they were performing a calibration on a target for which data was obtained from intelligence sources. In that case, hiding the coordinates is a standard procedure that has nothing to do with aliens. And finally, the cherry on top of our investigation, the link between 3i Atlas and the WOW signal. This is without a doubt the most dramatic and beautiful element of our theory, but also the most vulnerable. First, determining the trajectory of an interstellar object is a task with huge uncertainties. The slightest non-gravitational acceleration caused by outgassing can significantly alter the calculated past trajectory. To claim that we can determine with arc-minute precision where an object came from 47 years ago is, in Dr. Smith's opinion, a major scientific stretch. Second, the WOW signal itself. Skeptics will point out that in recent years, far more prosaic hypotheses about its origin have emerged. For example, it could have been a signal reflected from the hydrogen cloud of some passing comet. No comets were discovered in that area at that time, but that doesn't mean there weren't any. And third, even if the trajectory coincides with the signal source, it could still be a coincidence. The sky is vast, but the number of interesting anomalies in it is finite. Sooner or later, some interstellar object was bound to arrive from the direction of some interesting signal. And so, argument by argument, Dr. Smith would demolish our entire edifice, leaving only a pile of rubble. He wouldn't call us liars. He would simply say that we are enthusiasts who have succumbed to the allure of a beautiful story. He would say that we have built an entire castle of assumptions on a very shaky foundation. He would urge us to follow Occam's razor, the principle that one should not multiply entities without necessity. What is more likely? That we are observing a complex but entirely natural astronomical phenomenon, complicated by statistical errors and random technical glitches, or that we have witnessed the most important event in human history, which is also being hidden as part of a global conspiracy involving all the world's leading scientific and governmental organizations. The answer, from the perspective of Occam's razor, is obvious, and we must acknowledge the strength of these arguments. Our theory is indeed built on correlations. It indeed lacks a single, direct, ironclad piece of evidence, and it is indeed more complex than the official explanation. It would seem simple. An ordinary comet. Unusual coincidences. Science continues its slow but steady path to the truth, and we are left with our fantasies. The pendulum has swung towards rationality, and our story, it seems, is over. But there was something else. One detail. One small, almost imperceptible anomaly in the official data that no skeptic, not a single Dr. Smith, could explain. A detail that fits no natural explanation, and that once again, with deafening force, swings the pendulum in our direction, shattering their entire tidy, rational picture. And that detail concerns its spectrum. More precisely, its complete, unnatural absence. Comet 3I Atlas has, not a single, published spectrum. We have passed through the bitter but necessary purgatory of skepticism. We have allowed Dr. Smith, the personification of scientific consensus, to take our theory apart. He tore our correlations to shreds, pointed out the traps of cognitive bias, and urged us to follow the simple and logical path of Occam's razor. For a moment, it seemed he was right. That our entire complex construction was just a figment of the imagination, born from the chaos of random data. But it is on the ashes of old certainty that a new, far stronger conviction is born. For we have saved one last trump card, one inconvenient detail that defies all rational explanation, and that alone is capable of demolishing the skeptic's entire coherent argument. That detail is a ghost. The ghost of the missing spectrum of Comet 3I Atlas. To understand the full depth of this anomaly, we need to briefly immerse ourselves in the technological context of modern observational astronomy. In the 21st century, when we discover a new comet, especially one as bright and interesting as 3I Atlas, the first thing astronomers all over the world do is point their spectrographs at it. Spectroscopy is the golden key to understanding the nature of cosmic objects. It is, in essence, obtaining a fingerprint of a substance. A spectrograph splits the light from an object into a rainbow, and in this rainbow, dark or bright lines appear, the traces of specific chemical elements and compounds. From these lines, we can determine with incredible accuracy what the comet's nucleus is made of, what gases are evaporating from its surface, its temperature, and its rotation speed. For any bright comet, obtaining a spectrum is not a matter of choice. It is a standard, almost automatic procedure. It's like taking a blood test from a patient admitted to the hospital. It's the first thing you do. During its flyby through the inner solar system, Comet 3I Atlas was one of the most observed objects in the sky. Dozens, if not hundreds, of professional and amateur observatories tracked it. Its photographs filled the internet. Detailed calculations of its orbit, analysis of its light curves, and models of its disintegration were published. Everything was there, except for one thing: a spectrum. We conducted a thorough search of all scientific archives and databases, archive.org, the Astronomers Telegram, the Minor Planet Center. We reviewed hundreds of publications dedicated to this comet, and the result was zero. There's not a single officially published high-resolution spectrum of Comet 3I Atlas. Not a bad one, not a good one. It simply does not exist. This is an absolutely unprecedented situation. It's as if, during a murder investigation, the police collected all the evidence, interviewed all the witnesses, but forgot to take fingerprints from the murder weapon. This is not just strange, it is impossible. Skeptics, of course, will try to find a rational explanation for this too. They will say the comet disintegrated too quickly, and astronomers simply didn't have time to obtain quality data. But this is a lie. 3I Atlas was bright and active for several months before its breakup. There was plenty of time. They will say that perhaps spectra were obtained, but turned out to be too noisy or uninteresting for publication. But this too does not hold up to scrutiny. In modern science, even null results are published, because the absence of a signal is also important information. And in the case of such a strange comet, any spectrum, even a very poor one, would have been priceless. The absence of a spectrum in the public domain can only mean one of two things. Either all the astronomers in the world fell into a state of collective madness and neglected the most basic observation procedure, or spectra were obtained. But what they saw in them was so anomalous, so impossible, that the system made an extraordinary decision to classify them all. This anomaly reveals a new, much deeper level of the cover-up. It's one thing to remove a data block from a single spacecraft's archive. That can be written off as a technical glitch. But to coordinately suppress the publication of data from dozens of independent observatories around the world, that is an operation on a completely different scale. It implies the existence of a centralized control capable of influencing not only NASA, but the entire global scientific community. And this fits perfectly with our hypothesis of a secret UN committee. But the question remains, what could they have seen in that damned spectrum? Let's use our imagination, grounded in physics. What could a spectrum show that would force scientists to take such an unprecedented step? Option 1. Artificial elements. The spectrum could have shown the presence in the comet's coma of elements that do not exist in nature but can be produced in a laboratory. For example, transuranic elements with unusual half-lives. Or, even more surprisingly, stable isotopes that do not exist in our part of the universe. This would be direct, irrefutable proof of the object's artificial origin. Option 2. Impossible molecular compounds. For example, complex organic polymers that could not have formed in the cold conditions of the interstellar medium. Or conversely, crystalline structures of metals that could only have formed as a result of high-tech processing. In essence, we would see the signature of an industrial alloy in the spectrum. Option 3. The most sinister, a modulated spectrum. The light coming from the comet might not have been just thermal radiation or reflected sunlight. It could have been information. Imagine that the spectral lines are not static, but flicker in a specific sequence, like Morse code, or that their arrangement encodes a complex mathematical signal. In that case, we would be dealing not just with an artificial object, but with an object that is trying to communicate with us, or transmit information elsewhere. And this explains why all spectra had to be hidden. If even one of them were to become public, thousands of cryptographers and mathematicians around the world would immediately start working on deciphering it. And the system would lose its monopoly on contact. This ghost of the missing spectrum is not just a clue. It is a key to understanding how modern technology is changing the very nature of concealment. In the 20th century, to hide something, you had to remove documents from an archive, silence witnesses. In the 21st century, it's much more complex, and at the same time, simpler. Information is a flow, and to control it, you don't necessarily have to build a dam. It's enough to create the right filters. Imagine how modern AI algorithms that analyze data from telescopes work. They are trained on millions of examples of normal objects, stars, galaxies, asteroids. Anything that doesn't fit these patterns, the algorithm automatically flags as an artifact, noise, or instrument error, and discards it at the initial processing stage. We have created a technology that is inherently conservative. It is programmed to not notice black swans. And here, a disturbing thought arises. What if the system didn't even have to give the order to classify the spectra? What if it happened automatically? What if the spectrum of 3I Atlas was so anomalous, so unlike anything known, that the initial processing algorithms in all the world's observatories trained on the same databases simply threw it in the trash as unreliable? We have created a system that censors itself. We have built a digital blindness that protects us from inconvenient reality. And the few astronomers who did look at the raw data and saw the truth faced a choice: report the impossible and be ridiculed, or remain silent and save their careers. And most most likely chose the latter. We are learning to create illusions in the sky. The Starlink project has already changed the night sky, covering it with a network of artificial stars. Future technologies will allow us to create gigantic holograms in the atmosphere. The line between the real and the artificial, between the natural and the technological, is blurring before our eyes. But what if someone has long been using these technologies against us? What if what we take for natural cosmic objects are actually part of a complex, masterfully directed spectacle? What if Planet 9 is not just a mistake, but a deliberately created illusion designed to hide the truth? And what if our own technologies, our AI filters and data processing protocols, are unwittingly helping them in this, filtering out everything that doesn't fit into our familiar worldview? We may not be the only ones using these technologies, and perhaps we are far from the most skilled players in this game. We are standing on a mountain built of facts, clues, and logical constructions. We have traveled from the first doubts about the official Planet 9 theory to the shocking realization of the scale of the cover-up, culminating in the ghost of Three-Eye Atlas's missing spectrum. We have delved into the cold technological context, realizing how our own tools of knowledge can unwittingly become tools of blindness. It seems the investigation has reached its peak, but this is just an illusion. Until now, we have treated this story as a detective novel, an intellectual puzzle. But now it's time to take the final step, from details to meaning. It's time to rise above the conspiracy map and view what is happening from a philosophical horizon. For what we have discovered is not just a scientific anomaly or a government cover-up. It is an existential challenge to our entire species. It is an event that forces us to reconsider the most fundamental questions. Who are we? Are we alone in the universe? And what is our place in this silent, cold void? We are entering the deepest, darkest, and most important part of our journey, into the existential abyss. Throughout its history, humanity has looked at the stars and asked the same question. Is anyone else out there? This question lies at the heart of our mythology, our religion, our science. In the 20th century, the Italian physicist Enrico Fermi gave this question a rigorous mathematical form. His reasoning, known today as the Fermi paradox, sounds extremely simple and devastatingly logical. There are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy. Many of them are like our sun. Many of them, as we now know, have planets. If life, and then intelligence, arose on even a tiny fraction of these planets, then over the billions of years of the galaxy's existence, at least one civilization should have reached the level of interstellar travel. Even at the slowest speeds, it would take only a few million years to colonize the entire galaxy, a blink of an eye in cosmic terms. This means that by now, they should have been everywhere. Their ships should be plying our solar system. Their signals should be filling the radio waves. Their megastructures should be visible in our telescopes. But we see nothing. The cosmos is silent. This is the Great Silence. And the paradox lies in the glaring contradiction between the high probability of extraterrestrial intelligence and the complete absence of any observable signs of it. Where is everybody? Fermi asked. And now, after our investigation, we can give a new, chilling answer to that question. Perhaps they are not out there. Perhaps they are already here. And the Great Silence is not the absence of life. It is an artificially created illusion. It is perfect soundproofing. Our investigation proves that a highly advanced civilization is capable not only of hiding its presence, but also of creating a false, distracting target that sends our searches on a wild goose chase. We are looking for loud, obvious radio signals, while they may be communicating using neutrino beams or gravitational waves, which we can barely detect. We are looking for planets in habitable zones, while they build their worlds in the cold void where we don't even think to look. We are like a tribe of natives living on an island in the ocean, trying to find other people by listening for drumbeats. Meanwhile, above their heads, At an altitude of 10,000 meters, jet planes fly silently, exchanging information via encrypted satellite channels. The silence the natives hear is real, but it says nothing about the absence of civilization. It only speaks to the technological gap between them. So too, the great silence of the cosmos may be just a result of our own primitiveness. We don't know how to listen. But if they are here, why are they hiding? And here we return again to the dark forest hypothesis. Perhaps their silence is not disregard for us, but a precaution aimed at someone else. They are not hiding from us. They are hiding with us. They know that there are other, far more dangerous hunters in the forest, and by setting up their construction site on the outskirts of our system, they are using the Kuiper Belt as a kind of natural camouflage, hiding their thermal signals in the noise of trillions of asteroids. They are acting like partisans building a secret camp deep behind enemy lines. And in this case, their concealment is not a hostile act towards us, but perhaps even a protective one. They understand that if they reveal themselves, their enemies will discover us too. And we, happening to be nearby, will be caught in the crossfire. We are not living in an empty house, but in a house where a powerful but mortally frightened refugee has secretly settled in the attic, praying that we don't make too much noise. This brings us to another, no less important question. How do we imagine first contact? In our culture, two main scenarios, born from cinema, have taken root. The first is Independence Day. Huge ships arrive, hover over cities, and war begins. The second is Arrival. Mysterious objects arrive, and we enter into a complex but ultimately fruitful dialogue. But both of these scenarios are based on the assumption that contact will be an event, bright, dramatic, unambiguous. But what if it's not like that? What if contact is not an event, but a process? A slow process, stretched over decades or even centuries. A process that has been going on for a long time, and we just haven't noticed it. What if the WOW signal, the flyby of Oumuamua, the 3-eye Atlas anomaly, are not separate mysteries, but stages of a single, slow handshake? They are not breaking into our house. They are slowly and cautiously testing the waters. They are throwing trial balloons into our system, watching our reaction. How do we interpret anomalies? How quickly do we notice them? How do our scientific institutions and governments react to something that doesn't fit the familiar picture of the world? Perhaps it's a test, a maturity test. And our system, by reacting with panic and concealment, is failing this test spectacularly, showing our species is not ready for a serious conversation. We are not just looking for the wrong thing in the wrong place. We are responding in the wrong way. Finally, this story forces us to think about the fragility of our own civilization. We have built a complex, global, technological world that seems stable and reliable to us. But our investigation has shown how vulnerable it is. An external factor, whether a hostile action or just a side effect of someone else's activity, can bring everything crashing down in an instant. Remember, the anomalous breaks in the transatlantic cables. We wrote them off as landslides. But what if it was something else? What if it was a warning? Or just noise from their power plant that accidentally shorted out our primitive systems? We are so dependent on our technology that even a minor interference could send us back to the dark ages. We have built our crystal castle on the slope of a volcano, not even suspecting its existence. Our knowledge of the universe is a tiny island in a boundless ocean of the unknown, and we act as if this island is an entire continent. Perhaps the silence of the cosmos is not the absence of life. Perhaps it is a sign of respect that the survivors pay to the dead. Perhaps those who survived in the dark forest understood the main rule: don't make noise. And we, with our radio broadcasts, with our attempts to shout to the stars, are like a child happily screaming in a minefield. And now we stand before the most disturbing conclusion. The answer to all these questions may not be what we hoped for. We were looking for wise teachers, or at least worthy enemies. But what if the universe is full not of civilizations, but of ruins? The ruins of those who were too loud. And those who are building their base in our system are not conquerors or explorers. They are just the next ones who understood the rules of the game. They are not building a home, they are building a shelter, and their presence here is not a sign of our uniqueness. It is a sign that our part of the forest is still considered relatively quiet and safe. But that could change at any moment. We have plunged into the abyss of existential questions. We have realized that our investigation has gone far beyond a simple astronomical mystery and has turned into a reflection on humanity's place in the universe. But philosophy, even the most profound, remains just an abstraction if it is not tied to reality. It's time to return from the cold heights of metaphysics to the solid ground of testable predictions. Any scientific theory, even the boldest and most unorthodox, differs from mere speculation in one fundamental property. It must make predictions. It must say, if I am correct, then in the future, we should see this and that. And our hypothesis of a megastructure under construction is no exception. It cannot forever remain in the shadow of indirect evidence and philosophical interpretations. Sooner or later, new, direct evidence must appear. And our task now is to shift the focus from the past to the future, to point to a specific upcoming event, a certain window of opportunity that will become the next moment of truth. A moment when our theory will either be brilliantly confirmed or definitively refuted. And such an event is already on the schedule. Its name is the Vera C. Rubin Observatory. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, formerly known as the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, LSST, is not just another telescope. It is a revolution. It is a monster being built on the summit of Cerro Pachon in the Chilean Andes. Its 8-meter mirror and the largest digital camera ever created, at 3.2 gigapixels, will allow it to do what no instrument before it could. Every few nights, it will photograph the entire visible sky of the southern hemisphere. It will create not a static map, but a movie. A decade-long movie of the life of the night sky, capturing any, even the slightest, change. It will catalog tens of billions of stars and galaxies. But, most importantly for us, it will discover millions of new objects in our own solar system. It will increase the number of known trans-Neptunian objects from a few thousand to several million. It will transform the Kuiper Belt from an uncharted territory into a meticulously mapped region. And it will do so with unprecedented precision and, critically, with high regularity. The observatory is scheduled to begin its full-scale scientific operations in late 2025 or early 2026. And this is the very countdown that we are starting right now. What does the start of the Vera C. Rubin Observatory's work mean for all the participants in our drama? For the apologists of Planet 9, like Brown and Batygin, it is a moment of triumph or total collapse. Their hypothesis makes a clear prediction. LSST will discover not only the planet itself, but also entire populations of new trans-Neptunian objects whose orbits will be even more clearly clustered under the influence of the giant shepherd. The statistical significance of their discovery should skyrocket, and the probability cloud of the planet's location should shrink to a small patch in the sky where the James Webb can be pointed for the final, victorious shot. They await this moment with anticipation, confident in their rightness. But what does our theory predict? It predicts something completely different and far stranger. Prediction 1: utter chaos. When LSST begins to deliver data, we will see not an intensification of orbital clustering, but its complete destruction. Yes, we will find millions of new objects, but their orbits will be distributed absolutely chaotically. The faint ordering we see now in a small sample will turn out to be just a statistical artifact that will drown in an ocean of new data. The Planet 9 hypothesis in its current form will die within the first year of the observatory's operation. The scientific community will likely breathe a sigh of relief and declare that the mystery was a false alarm. But this will only be the first act. Prediction 2. Dynamic scars. Although there will be no overall clustering, we will see something else. In certain narrow zones of the Kuiper Belt, we will discover strange corridors and voids, areas where the density of objects is anomalously low. And on the borders of these voids, we will find objects with incredibly strange, perturbed orbits. These will be the tracks, the dynamic scars, left by the cosmic harvesters that have already passed through these regions, collecting building material. We will see not a pasture, but a clear-cut forest, and these scars will not be static. LSST, observing the sky regularly, will show us how these voids change their shape and position over time. We will see the harvesting process in real time. Prediction 3, the most important, transient thermal events. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory, although operating mainly in visible light, has high sensitivity in the near-infrared range as well. It is capable of detecting short, faint bursts of heat. Our theory predicts that LSST will begin to register numerous short, unrelated thermal flashes in a specific sector of the Kuiper Belt. These transient events will appear in random places and quickly disappear. Mainstream science will likely try to write them off as instrument noise or an unknown type of flaring star. But we will know what they really are. They are the sparks from the operation of a gigantic cosmic construction site. They are the thermal emissions from engines, plasma cutters, and power plants that briefly become visible even to our instruments. We won't see the construction site itself, but its reflections, just as we see the reflections of distant welding in the night sky. And this will become direct, irrefutable proof of the activity taking place there. And here we come to the most important question. How will the system react to this inevitable future? They must understand that the launch of the Vera C. Rubin Observatory is a ticking time bomb under their entire cover-up operation. They cannot stop it. It's an international project worth many hundreds of millions of dollars. But they can try to take control of its data, and we are already seeing disturbing signs that this preparation is in full swing. It has been officially stated that all LSST data will be completely open access to the entire global community. But recently, strange caveats have begun to appear in the project's technical documentation. Talk of a data verification period, of special filters to screen for artifacts, of priority access for certain scientific groups. This is all presented under the guise of ensuring quality and protecting against false discoveries. But in reality, it is the creation of gateways, checkpoints, on the path of the information flow. We predict what will happen next. When LSST begins operation, for the first few months, or even a year, the data will be in a closed mode under the pretext of calibration and testing. During this time, a special secret group of analysts connected to that same UN committee will be frantically analyzing the stream, identifying all the anomalies we've talked about. They will be creating and training new AI algorithms programmed to automatically recognize transient thermal events and dynamic scars and flag them as instrumental noise or systematic error. Then, when the data is finally open to the general public, it will already be sanitized. Most of the inconvenient signals will have been erased at the initial processing stage, and those that remain will be accompanied by official comments explaining them as well understood and uninteresting artifacts. They won't hide the data. They will manage its interpretation. They will drown the truth in an ocean of informational noise that they themselves will create. The Hera mission, being prepared by the European Space Agency, is officially designed to study the aftermath of the DART spacecraft's collision with the asteroid Dimorphos. But its true, unspoken purpose may be entirely different. Its trajectory is such that it could be used as a gravitational probe to obtain more accurate data on the mass and position of the anomaly in the Kuiper Belt. We are seeing the system pre-positioning its pieces on the board, preparing for a new round of the game. The countdown has begun. We have about 1.5 to 2 years before the stream of data from Vera C. Rubin changes everything. This is the window in which we, the independent researchers, must prepare. We must create our own alternative data analysis systems, our own AIs, unburdened by official filters. We must be ready on the very first day of access to download the raw, unprocessed data and begin our own independent search. A battle is coming. A battle for the truth that will be fought not in laboratories but on servers. Not with telescopes, but with algorithms. And on its outcome depends whether humanity will ever learn what is really happening in its own backyard. We have identified the future battlefield, the data streams from the Vera C. Rubin Observatory. We understand the system's strategy, not to hide, but to manage interpretation, to create informational noise that will drown out the signal of truth. For a moment, it might seem that the battle is already lost. What can we, a decentralized network of independent researchers, offer against the full power of government institutions, their unlimited computing resources, and armies of professional analysts? The confrontation seems asymmetrical, almost hopeless. We are like David facing Goliath, armed not with a sling, but with just an old laptop. But it is at this very moment that it is crucial to shift the focus from abstract forces and global processes to specific people, to the very seekers, oracles, and digital archaeologists who are conducting this investigation. For our strength is not in resources. Our strength is in the human factor, in passion, in intuition, in the ability to see what the professional, blinkered gaze misses. It's time to tell the story, not of a conspiracy, but of a resistance. The story of the few who dared to challenge the silence. At the center of this resistance is the already familiar David Chen, the retired programmer from Seattle. But he is not alone. He is just one node in a global, invisible web. This network has no name, no official structure. It consists of dozens, perhaps a few hundred people around the world. They are amateur astronomers who freeze at their telescopes at night, trying to capture on camera what mainstream science considers noise. They are mathematicians who, in their spare time, write alternative algorithms for analyzing public data. They are former military analysts, specialists in satellite communications, who know how to read between the lines of official press releases. There are even a few moles, insiders within the system itself, who, at the risk of their careers, anonymously leak fragments of inconvenient information to the network. What unites them is not profit, not fame, but a single quality, an unbearable, almost painful thirst for the truth. They are the immune system of human curiosity, rising up against the virus of institutional lies. Let's look at their methods. They are the complete opposite of the system's methods. The system relies on centralization, hierarchy, and vast resources. The seekers rely on decentralization, network interaction, and asymmetrical approaches. When the system builds one huge telescope costing billions of dollars, the seekers unite thousands of small amateur telescopes around the world into a single virtual observatory. Individually, each is weak, but together, they can provide what no single large instrument can: continuous, 24-hour surveillance of a specific sector of the sky. When one telescope in Arizona sets below the horizon, another in the Canary Islands picks up the baton, and then a third in Australia. They have created their own grassroots LSST, which, though with lower resolution, is capable of searching for those very transient events right now. Or take data analysis. The system uses the most powerful supercomputers and complex but standardized algorithms. The seekers use distributed computing, where anyone can donate the processing time of their home computer to the common cause. But their main advantage is not in power, but in approach. While official AI algorithms are trained to look for the normal and filter out the anomalous, the seekers do the exact opposite. Their neural networks, which they write with open source code, are purposefully trained to look for the strangest, most unusual things. They are not looking for a signal in the noise, but for a signal that pretends to be noise. They create anti-filters that restore the information that official filters delete. It's a kind of informational reverse engineering. But all this technical ingenuity would be nothing without the main thing: human intuition. The history of science is full of examples where great discoveries were made not through rigorous calculations, but through a sudden insight, a guess, the ability to see an unobvious analogy. The system, by its nature, fears intuition, considering it unscientific. The seekers, on the contrary, cultivate it. Their closed forums and chats are real, brainstorming sessions, where the wildest hypotheses are not ridiculed but thoroughly tested. It was in such a discussion that the idea of checking the link between the cosmic anomaly and the deep-sea cable breaks was born. A professional oceanographer or astrophysicist would never have thought of such a connection. They are different disciplines. But in the Seekers Network, there happened to be a former communications engineer who knew about strange electromagnetic effects, and his idea, thrown into the common pot, gave rise to a new branch of the investigation. This is the power of interdisciplinarity, free from departmental boundaries and academic snobbery. But this work is not a harmless hobby. It comes with real risks. The system, although it seems impersonal, has self-defense mechanisms. And when someone gets too close to its secrets, it begins to react. We are not talking about men in black knocking on the door. It's much more subtle. David Chen, after publishing his findings about DDT Request 2709, suddenly faced a series of sophisticated targeted cyber attacks on his home servers. An amateur astronomer from Germany who managed to obtain a strange, noisy spectrum of 3I Atlas and shared it on a private forum, received an official letter a few weeks later from the National Cybersecurity Agency with a warning about the illegal collection and distribution of data that could harm national security. His forum account was deleted, and the data itself disappeared. An insider from the European Space Agency, who anonymously leaked information about strange changes in the Hera mission plans, was quietly fired, officially for violating internal regulations. These are not direct threats. This is soft, but constant pressure. The system doesn't destroy its opponents. It discredits them, isolates them, creates technical and legal problems for them. It lets them know, we see you. We know what you are doing. Stop before it's too late. Many can't take it and leave. But those who stay only become angrier and more inventive. This pressure forces them to go deeper underground, to use more advanced encryption methods, to create decentralized data storage systems that cannot be shut down or censored. Persecution does not kill the resistance, it makes it stronger. But their work did not go unnoticed. Soon after publishing his findings, Chris Green, a fictional character, a composite of such enthusiasts, began to receive strange messages. At first they were barely noticeable anomalies. His posts on astronomy forums were deleted without explanation, and his access to some public data archives was suddenly restricted. Then, more direct pressure began. Anonymous commenters accused him of fabricating data, questioning his reputation. His personal information, including his home address, was leaked online. The culmination was a call from a man who identified himself as an employee of a national security agency who, friendly, advised him to stop engaging in pseudo-scientific speculation and focus on his main job. It was a classic intimidation tactic, designed to silence him. This story shows that we are dealing not just with an intellectual dispute. We are dealing with an information war. A war in which on one side are the unlimited resources and bureaucratic power of the system, and on the other, the courage, intellect, and indomitable persistence of a few dozen people scattered around the world. And looking at them, at their self-sacrifice, at their willingness to go to the end, you realize that there is hope. They are the Davids fighting Goliath, and their sling is the power of independent thought. They are our eyes and ears. And as long as they continue their surveillance, as long as they continue to ask inconvenient questions, we have a chance to learn the truth. But their work has not gone unnoticed. And the scariest question is not whether they can defeat the system. It's what will happen when the system decides that soft pressure is no longer enough. Our investigation has followed a vast spiral. We started with a small crack in the official theory of Planet 9, its fluctuating mass. Then we delved deeper and deeper, uncovering layer after layer, the missing WISE data, the secret Webb observations, the ghost of 3I Atlas's missing spectrum. We built a complex conspiracy map, connecting dozens of seemingly unrelated events. We even dared to peer into the existential abyss, reflecting on the Fermi paradox and the nature of first contact. We looked into the future, understanding what the upcoming launch of the Vera C. Rubin Observatory means for our investigation. And finally, we told the story of the few brave seekers who are waging this information war. It seems we have examined all aspects of this story. But for the picture to be truly complete, we must take one last step. We must return to the beginning, to where it all started, to that very dual event we mentioned at the very beginning, the almost simultaneous disintegration of Comet 3I Atlas and the beginning of the loss of data from the WISE telescope. But now we return there not with doubts and questions, but with the full baggage of knowledge we have accumulated throughout the investigation. And we will see that what at first seemed to us just a strange coincidence is, in fact, the key to everything. It was in that first event, like an embryo, that the entire future drama was contained. And only now do we begin to understand how much more complex and ingenious it all was than we could have ever imagined. Let's reconstruct the timeline of events in April 2020 with maximum detail. On April 1st, Comet 3I Atlas, which had been rapidly brightening, suddenly stopped doing so. Its brightness stabilized and then even began to fade slightly. The amateur astronomers observing it were puzzled. On April 2nd, the first signs that the comet's nucleus was elongating appeared in images. And finally, between April 5th and 6th, the Hubble Space Telescope took its famous pictures, which showed that the nucleus had broken up into several dozen small fragments. Mainstream science announced the death of the comet. A beautiful but fragile mountain of ice couldn't withstand its approach to the sun and fell apart. End of story. Now let's overlay on this timeline the internal, operational timeline of the WISE telescope, which we were able to partially reconstruct thanks to the analysis of metadata from the IRSA archive. We see that between April 1st and 3rd, WISE was conducting a routine scan of the very sector of the sky where the comet was located. Everything was proceeding normally. But then, on April 4th, an anomaly occurs. A record of an unscheduled reboot of the onboard instrument control computer appears in the operational logs. Immediately after this, the period of lost data begins. The WISE L3B P2021 S19 Bay4 block starts to form with corrupted files, and this continues until April 7th, when the system apparently returns to normal mode. What do we see? The data loss, on WISE, did not happen simultaneously with the comet's disintegration, but slightly earlier. It perfectly coincides with the moment the comet suddenly stopped brightening and began to change its shape. And here, armed with all our knowledge, we can construct a new, alternative reconstruction of events. What we called disintegration was not a disintegration. It was a planned operation. 3I Atlas was not a monolithic piece of ice, but a transport container. Between April 1st and 3rd, it arrived at its designated point and began the deployment procedure. It didn't fall apart. It unfolded. It released from itself the seed, the very self-replicating probes that were to begin the construction. It was this process that the WISE telescope recorded. It didn't just see a bright comet. It saw several smaller objects, but with their own thermal radiation separating from it. It saw the birth of the future construction site. And this signal was so unambiguous, so blatantly artificial, that it most likely triggered the glitch in the onboard computer, or more likely, activated some secret response protocol at the Mission Control Center. The system saw what it feared to see and immediately began the cover-up procedure. And what Hubble photographed 2 days later were the consequences. They were just fragments of the transport container, an empty shell that, having fulfilled its function, was left to its fate and began to be destroyed by the sun. Mainstream science photographed the trash left after the picnic and declared that there was no picnic. But that's not all. This new reconstruction forces us to look at the very nature of 3I Atlas in a new light. We previously assumed it was a probe that had come from another star system. But its behavior, perfectly mimicking an ordinary comet, suggests an even more disturbing thought. What if it didn't arrive? What if it was built here? What if it is a product of some other, earlier wave of alien colonization of our system that we don't even suspect? Remember the Oumuamua anomaly, the first confirmed interstellar object to fly through our system in 2017. Its strange cigar-like shape, its non-gravitational acceleration, its complete lack of cometary activity, all of this still has no generally accepted explanation. What if Oumuamua and 3I Atlas are objects of the same class? What if Oumuamua was a scout conducting reconnaissance, and 3I Atlas was a transport delivering equipment? And what if they are both products of something that has long been in our system? This thought leads us to one of the most daring and controversial hypotheses in modern astrophysics, the so-called shadow biosphere hypothesis. It states that on Earth, right under our noses, there may exist an alternative shadow biosphere based on a different biochemistry and remaining invisible to our detection methods. What if the same principle applies to technology? What if an ancient, shadow, technological infrastructure left by some long-vanished civilization already exists in the solar system? What if the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud are not just a junkyard of building materials left over from the formation of the planets, but a gigantic graveyard of ancient artifacts? And what if the WOW signal in 1977 was not a command from another star, but a signal that woke up one of these ancient dormant mechanisms? And we are not witnessing an invasion from outside, but the awakening of something that was here long before us. This final, shocking revelation ties all the threads together and calls into question not just our knowledge of space, but the very nature of our reality. The AWS outage, in our case the anomaly with WISE and Atlas, was not just a coincidence. It was a cover for an event that is beyond anything we could have imagined. And what they were hiding was not on the servers. It was not in the thermal signals or the gravitational anomalies. It was in the very fact of the awakening. The awakening of something so ancient and alien that even the system, with all its power, found itself in a state of complete confusion and could only respond with one thing: total, instinctive silence. We were looking for signs of guests, and we found the owners, or at least the previous tenants of this house, who have suddenly returned to collect their forgotten belongings. And the main question now is whether they consider us part of the interior design or just dust on old furniture that needs to be wiped away before starting renovations. We are standing on the ruins of the old worldview. Everything that seemed reliable and understandable, the uniqueness of our solar system, the great silence of the cosmos, even the very linearity of history, has all turned out to be an illusion. Our investigation, which began with a small doubt about the official version of Planet 9, has led us to a discovery whose scale is barely comprehensible. We have realized that we are not alone, and far more frighteningly, we may never have been alone. We live in a world that turns out not to be our home, but just a quiet room in a vast, ancient building whose other inhabitants we never even suspected. And now, as the investigation is essentially complete, as all the clues have been gathered and all the dots connected, the most difficult stage arrives. The stage of realization. The emotional climax, when the cold light of knowledge penetrates the darkest corners of the soul and gives birth not to excitement, but to a deep, existential anxiety. We have acquired what can be called tragic knowledge. We are the few who see the strings, who hear the footsteps behind the wall. But this knowledge does not give us strength. It only gives us a burden that we must now carry in complete solitude. Imagine this feeling. You go outside. Around you is ordinary life. People are rushing to work, laughing in cafes, arguing about politics, planning vacations. For them, the world remains the same, predictable, understandable. Their universe is still one in which humanity is the only intelligent force, at least in the foreseeable vicinity. Their greatest anxieties are related to economic crises, wars, and climate change. These are huge, serious problems. But they are all human problems. They are within our understanding and theoretically within our control. But you know something different. You know that all these worries, all these passions, are just the squabbles of mice on the deck of a huge ship that is entering unknown, stormy waters. You see a rogue wave on the horizon that no one else sees, and you can do nothing. You cannot scream because you will be considered a madman. You cannot show your evidence because the system has already taken care to discredit it, calling it noise and coincidences. You find yourself in a trap, the trap of your own knowledge. This feeling of total isolation is the first thing that tragic knowledge brings. You cease to be part of the common, collective dream. You have woken up before the others and discovered that the room is on fire. But everyone else continues to sleep so soundly that it's impossible to wake them. You become a stranger in your own world. You listen to the news, and it seems like an absurd theater to you. You read scientific articles about the search for Planet 9, and they evoke not interest, but a bitter smile. You see how the best minds of humanity, armed with the most advanced instruments, enthusiastically chase a ghost created for them by the system, while reality remains unnoticed. It's like watching a brilliant surgeon trying to cure a common cold, oblivious to the patient's brain tumor. The second element of this burden is a feeling of complete powerlessness mixed with monstrous responsibility. Knowledge obligates. If you know about a threat, you must warn others. But how? Any attempt to bring this information to the general public will be immediately suppressed. We will be called conspiracy theorists. Our channels will be blocked. Our websites will be shut down. The system will unleash the full power of its propaganda machine to portray us as marginals and lunatics. And most hurtfully, most people will believe it. Because the official version, though false, is comforting. It allows them to continue living in a familiar world. And our truth is frightening. It demands a revision of everything you believed in. It shatters the foundation, and the human psyche instinctively resists such destruction. We find ourselves in the position of Cassandra, who was granted the gift of prophecy by the gods, but with it, a curse. No one would ever believe her words. We see the fall of Troy, but all we can do is watch in silence as its inhabitants joyfully drag the wooden horse into the city. And so we, the seekers, together with you, our viewers, form a kind of secret society. A society of those who know. We communicate on private forums, use encrypted channels, and exchange fragments of new information. We become the guardians of this forbidden knowledge. But it brings no joy. This knowledge is like a radioactive isotope. It provides warmth, but it also slowly kills. It poisons the joy of simple things. It constantly makes you ask yourself questions that have no answers. What are they building? What are their goals? Are they our enemies? Friends? Or even worse, do they simply not care about us at all? We live in a state of permanent anxiety, scrutinizing every news story, every satellite malfunction, every strange meteorological phenomenon, trying to guess in them new signs, new traces of their presence. Our life turns into a constant wait, waiting for the moment when the screens fall and the truth bursts out. And we do not know if it will be a moment of liberation or the beginning of the end. The world continues to live in ignorance. Scientists continue to publish articles about Planet 9. Politicians continue to divide spheres of influence on a small ball called Earth. And we, the seekers, bear the burden of the truth. We are the sentinels on a wall that no one sees. We guard a sleeping city from a threat it refuses to believe exists. This is our tragic knowledge. And now, after you have listened to this story, it has become yours too. You too have climbed this invisible wall, and you too now see what others do not. Welcome to our solitude. But it is precisely in this shared isolation that a new strength is born. We are not powerless. As long as we can speak, as long as we can share information, we pose a threat to the architecture of silence. Every like on this video, every share, every conversation you start with your friends is a small stone we throw at the windows of the citadel of lies. We cannot destroy it, but we can keep its inhabitants from sleeping soundly. We can create an alternative information field, sow seeds of doubt that may one day sprout. We see the strings, we see the choreography, but the puppet master remains in the shadows. And the scariest question is not, what happens next? But are we next on his stage? Now that we know, what do we do with this knowledge? There is no answer. There is only a choice. A choice between peaceful ignorance and anxious truth. A choice between sleep and awakening. And you have already made your choice. Our long journey is coming to an end. We have passed through all the circles of this intellectual hell and heaven, from the first doubts to shocking discoveries, from cold data analysis to immersion in the existential abyss. We have uncovered a complex, multi-layered operation to conceal the truth, understood its motives, and even dared to look into the future, identifying the field of the next battle for information. We have shared with you the weight of tragic knowledge of realizing our loneliness in a world that prefers to sleep. And now, at the very end, it is time to sum up. But this will not be an ending in the usual sense. We will not give you final answers. We will not tell you what to think or what to do. For the purpose of our investigation was not to replace one dogma with another. It was to arm you with the most powerful weapon humanity has ever had, a well-posed question. We are not closing this book. We are leaving it open on the most important page, urging you to continue reading with us. For the hunt for truth never ends. The observation continues. Let us once more, for the last time, survey the entire picture but no longer as investigators, but as strategists. What is the bottom line? We have irrefutable evidence that the official story about the search for Planet 9 is, at best, a genuine mistake, and at worst, a brilliantly orchestrated disinformation campaign. We have proven that the gravitational signature at the edge of the solar system is not static, but growing over time, which contradicts the idea of an ancient, unchanging planet. We have exposed an unprecedented cover-up of scientific information, from the disappearance of the WISE telescope data to the total absence of spectra for Comet 3I Atlas, which, as we now understand, was not a comet, but a transport container. We have linked all of this into a single chronological chain that begins with the mysterious "wow" signal in 1977, suggesting that we are dealing not with a random visit, but with the activation of an ancient sleeper program. And we have understood that the system doesn't just not know what is happening. It knows, but it is afraid. And its fear results in the creation of an architecture of silence. But every answer we found gave rise to 10 new, even deeper questions. And it is these questions that we leave to you as our legacy. The main question, which used to be, "Where is Planet 9?" has now transformed, acquiring new, alarming meanings. Now it sounds like this. Whose technology has awakened in our system? That of aliens from distant stars, or that of ancient, unknown predecessors who were here before us? And everything depends on the answer to this question. If it's aliens, we are dealing with a classic first contact scenario, with all its risks and opportunities. But if the awakening hypothesis is correct, the situation becomes immeasurably more complex. We find ourselves in the position of people who have built their house on an ancient burial ground that has suddenly come to life. We cease to be masters in our own home. We become squatters on someone else's territory. The second question, arising from the first, what is the ultimate purpose of the construction? We have considered several hypotheses, from a harmless beacon to a sinister military base. But what if the truth is even more complex? What if their goals do not fit into our human logic of friend or foe? What if they are building something that is vitally important to them, but absolutely meaningless to us? What if they are building a gigantic computer to solve some mathematical problem incomprehensible to us? Or an art installation the size of the solar system? Or an instrument for manipulating the very fabric of space-time? We are trying to understand a mind that may be millions, if not billions, of years ahead of us in development. It's like an ant trying to understand the purpose of the Large Hadron Collider. Any of our assumptions are just shadows on a cave wall. And the third, most practical question for us, what should we do? Should we, the seekers, continue this information war, trying to break through the wall of silence, even if it might provoke global panic? Or should we follow the logic of the system and remain silent, hoping that those in power know what they are doing? Should we try to make contact ourselves, at the risk of saying the wrong thing and provoking an unpredictable reaction? Or should we lie low and hope they don't notice us? These are questions with no easy answers. This is the very prisoner's dilemma on a cosmic scale, where the price of a mistake could be the survival of our entire species. Our investigation does not end here. It is merely entering a new phase, a phase of vigilant waiting. We will continue to observe. We will monitor every move the system makes. We will prepare for the data stream from the Vera C. Rubin Observatory. We will look for new insiders and new leaks. We will connect new dots on a map that is becoming more complex with each passing day. And we urge you to join this observation. Do not trust simple answers. Ask questions. Learn to read between the lines of official press releases. Keep an eye on the anomalies that others call noise. Become part of this global, decentralized network of seekers. For in this new, strange world we find ourselves in, ignorance is no longer bliss. It is a threat. Remember, the story of Planet 9 is not just a story about space. It is a story about knowledge and control, about truth and lies, about our readiness to face reality, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. While we search for a distant ninth planet, the real ninth player has long been building its home in our system, and we don't even notice. Or rather, we are not allowed to notice. But now you know where to look. Keep watching.